The race to build the first human settlement on Mars is underway. Scientists and engineers are building the monster rockets and fine-tuning the incredible technology needed to get humans onto the Red Planet. Volunteers the world over are signing up to be the first to undertake what may be a one-way voyage of unimaginable danger.
Booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ignition.
The first launch of a privately owned heavy rocket ushers in a new era of deep space exploration, while volunteers across the globe are training to be the first humans to colonize a cold, rocky planet 55 million kilometers away. A place that is completely alien to humans, yet has recognizable features like canyons, craters, ice fields, dunes.
I think this curiosity that I've had since I was a little kid, it'll never go away. I always say this, I say we have this one life and it's very finite and it's short. There's two guarantees, right? Well, one is that we're born and then the second is we're gonna die. But the things that we do in between that, I mean, it's infinite. It's absolutely unfathomable what you can do with your life. So for me, this idea that we can be the first generation to create a colony off our planet and just completely start a new timeline for our history as humans is really amazing and inspirational to me.
A 6-month voyage to Mars will be nothing like anything anyone has ever experienced. You will no longer be able to communicate with Earth in real time, but probably the most significant difference with an interplanetary mission is that Earth becomes smaller and smaller in your proverbial rear view mirror when your destination is still a small dot. And it will take a very special type of person to even want to venture out under those circumstances.
For many years, there's been a big debate among scientists as to whether robots or humans should do the pioneering work in the exploration of the solar system. Now I feel we're coming to understand that it's a mission of two halves. Robots are playing a vital role in preparing the way for humans. But there's something implicit within human nature that requires us to walk to the hill and look beyond, to look to the next hill and go to that one. It is part of curiosity. It is part of the very essence of what it is to be human.
Earth, a fertile planet of plenty, 3/4 covered by water, with lush forests that make oxygen for the atmosphere. It is teeming with life, including 7 billion people who are perilously changing the natural environment. Today, people across the planet are looking to Mars as a new frontier of exploration and habitation. Nowhere is the goal as close as in California, a high-tech hub that is the 6th largest economy in the world, and where SpaceX is engineering the state-of-the-art rockets and capsules currently supplying the International Space Station. In the urban jungle of Los Angeles, 36-year-old Chinese-American actress Su An-pian is preparing to make the ultimate sacrifice as one of 100 elite candidates selected by a private company planning to put humans on Mars.
When you're going to be one of the first test flight astronauts, there's an inherent risk, and I think you have to take that into account, that the people who want to go, they're the explorers, they're the people who have always pushed our society forward, like the Vikings, or the first people that wanted to settle in the Americas. They were willing to leave everything behind, and sometimes they didn't make it, and sometimes they did. but we owe the advancement of our civilization to these forebears.
Cultural anthropologist Jack Stuster lives in nearby Santa Barbara, California. He studies humans in cramped and stressful conditions and provides recommendations to NASA about human factor psychology in deep space flight.
Living and working in a hostile environment can be very stressful. Living and working in a hostile environment in which you are confined with a small group of people can also be very stressful. And in space, you have the added stressors of the absence of gravity, the absence of access to your normal sources of gratification, your family, your friends. You can't go for a walk in the park or on the beach. You can't take your car out for a spin to blow off steam. You have to endure.
Long journeys through space present unique threats, not only to the mind, but also the human body. British astrophysicist David Baker began his career on the Apollo missions and has written over 100 books on spaceflight.
Humans, being biologically quite sophisticated and quite vulnerable, because our skeletons are on the inside, and so we're not protected from solar radiation and cosmic rays coming in from the galaxy. You are entering an environment that humans have never occupied for any extended period of time.
The unique geological features of northern Arizona, including the best preserved meteor impact crater on Earth, have for decades been considered analogues for astronauts training to go to the moon and other planets. The nearby city of Flagstaff is a hub for scientists studying astrogeology, thanks to the complex of federally funded government labs here known as the Astrogeology Science Center. Research geologist Lauren Edgar lives on Mars every day, through the eyes of the rover Curiosity, which she commands and tracks as it explores the surface of Mars, where it landed in 2013.
We landed on ancient stream beds, so that was a great welcome to the red planet. We went there to find ancient habitable environments, and landing on stream beds was a good start. But then we only had to drive a short ways before we encountered our first ancient lake deposits. And not just was a lake present, but it had all of the right conditions necessary to support life. And to do that all within the first 6 months of the mission, that's really what we went there for. And so that was exciting to accomplish that goal early.
As science and engineering make progress, we can assume that sometime in the next 2 decades, one of the front runners in the race to Mars will actually send a manned spaceship there. What are the real risks for humans? Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun, approximately 55 million kilometers away from Earth at its closest. Spacecraft have been visiting Mars for more than 30 years, mostly reconnaissance orbiters, but also, more recently, robotic rover vehicles that actually gather soil samples, scientific data, and more than 200,000 high-resolution photos, which scientists have transformed into 3D models that they use to study the surface of Mars. Every evening, the Curiosity rover bundles its new data and sends them back to labs on Earth for scientists to process the next morning.
Every day is a discovery. You never know what you're going to find in those new images. It's what gets us up in the morning and excited to come in and see the newest image of the day.
Even just from orbiting spacecraft, scientists can see ancient floodplains, dried up lake beds, river channels, and other evidence that this cold, dry planet once had flowing liquids, possibly water, on its surface. This is especially true in Gale Crater, the place scientists have identified as the best spot for landing a potential Mars mission.
The environments that are recorded within it feel very Earth-like. These are things that look similar to stuff that we see out in Death Valley, where you have large alluvial fans that are bringing material down from the mountains. At times that it was wetter, you might have had a lake or multiple lakes that were present on the floor of this crater. Around the margins, you probably had, deltas. On the drier times, you might have had wind-blown sand dunes. And those are all very familiar environments.
Although managing a Mars rover from afar has brought humanity much closer to the planet, robots still cannot do what humans do. Scientists estimate the flight to Mars will take 6 to 9 months, one way, using known propulsion technology. With a small team of humans confined in a very small space, devoid of many of the comforts of everyday life on Earth.
I've described an expedition to Mars from a behavioral perspective as being like 4 or 5 other people and you get into a motorhome and you drive around the country for 6 months. You can't go outside. You can't even look outside because the windows are blacked out. And then you get to your destination and you get outside. You can go live in this cabin on Mars for 18 months. You get to go outside once in a while, but you have to wear a spacesuit. You're very busy while you're there. And then you get back in the motorhome for another 6 months with the same people coming home.
So on the way to exploring surfaces and worlds, we need to know and explore ourselves as human beings, because the 3 big challenges of deep space exploration is the physical reaction, which is essentially how our bodies cope and how we as humans survive against incredibly hostile environments that we explore, the psychological response to having put ourselves far beyond Earth, and the group societal interactions that come from small, highly select, highly skilled, highly egotistical individuals.
Knowledge of how humans might live in space has greatly advanced in the last 20 years with the International Space Station. It has given the scientific community crucial clues as to what the mission to Mars might entail. The space station has been occupied by astronauts continuously since the year 2000. During that time, many of them kept journals that are now part of a behavioral study.
For 13 years, 21 astronauts maintained personal journals for this purpose that I subjected to a systematic analysis of the content. And it allowed us to identify the factors that contribute to adjustment to the conditions and the factors that impair adjustment. The number one factor that contributes to stress among the astronauts is unrealistic schedules.
You can see here on the clock, for example, and the planning and what we need to execute on the timeline of our working day is here on this computer screen. Everything that we need to do during the day is scheduled.
Every minute of an astronaut's day is planned. But tasks that might be expected to take 15 minutes could take double that in space. So these professionals, used to accomplishing their tasks on time, find themselves constantly playing catch-up.
One of the astronauts described it this way: if you were to take a bag of M&M candies and divide them, sort them by color, put them into baggies, it would take maybe 5 minutes on Earth. That would take 30 minutes on the International Space Station, just because of the absence of gravity. And when you're in a hurry, because you're behind schedule, when you put things away, the tendency is not to take very much care in putting them away. It's a cascading sequence of unintended consequences.
The International Space Station serves as a microgravity and space environment laboratory, where astronauts do research on biology, physics, astronomy, meteorology, and other fields. Its visitors have learned how to live weightlessly, sleep in space, use the bathroom in space, get their hair cut in space, work out in space to avoid losing muscle mass. Here, astronauts learn to keep busy and control frustration during long flights. The International Space Station lies within the Earth's protective magnetosphere, which deflects the Sun's dangerous radiation, trapping highly energized particles in the so-called Van Allen belts around Earth. It is impossible to tell what the effects on humans might be when exposed to solar and cosmic radiation outside the magnetosphere. To find out, scientists have proposed an intermediate station orbiting the Moon, known as the Deep Space Gateway. This theoretical space station would act as both a staging post for Mars, but also a permanent experimental station for astronauts exploring the effects of deep space on their own bodies.
There's great attention as we come to looking at sending people into deep space, as we call it, beyond the limited altitude of the International Space Station. We know that there are going to be permanent changes that occur to the human body, and some of those are going to be neurological. Theoretically, there are some huge challenges as to what long-term effects may accrue to people spending very long periods in deep space.
There is a good case could be made for more returning to the Moon as a testing ground for a Mars expedition. And if we do that, maybe in the meantime, a more energetic propulsion method will be developed that will cut the transit time down to 2 months. And then Mars becomes a much more attractive destination.
NASA has contracted US aerospace giant Lockheed Martin to develop potential habitats for such a moon-orbiting space station. And the company is designing a habitation module for humans to go to Mars. It is based on a logistics vehicle developed to resupply the International Space Station. Tim Jihan is the lead space exploration architect in this project.
I'm standing inside Lockheed Martin's Next Step Habitat Mockup in Denver, Colorado. We use this facility to test out different design concepts and lay out how we're going to place the items that are necessary inside the habitat. Some of the things that are here include the control center for the habitat, including the ability to control rovers or other robotics on the surface of the moon. There's also a lot of storage capability for all of the things the crew needs, food and water, things like that. If you look all the way back, you actually see the Orion spacecraft. Orion is a key part of the lunar gateway and provides a lot of the capability and the safety aspects needed for a long mission at the gateway.
In Europe, the Franco-Italian company Thales Alenia has already built several transport and habitation modules for the International Space Station, under contract from private companies supplying NASA and the European Space Agency. Engineer Franco Finoglio is the head of human space projects and is working on adapting a Cygnus pressurized logistics module as a human habitat for deep space. It is a challenge to design a habitat for humans to go farther away from home than ever before.
Actually will be the first group of people that will lose the tracking and the visibility to the Earth, because from the space station obviously you are orbiting around the Earth, but in the moment in which you will go to Mars you will lose this visibility. And so what this can induce in terms of a psychological effect is today still difficult to interpret.
Thales Alenia worked with astronauts to identify the top 3 design features they would like to see in future capsules. They specified these as better communal areas, more privacy, and, surprisingly, windows.
Very good. So we have full of cameras up here, And of course, robotic workstation, just like in the lab. And there's a beautiful Earth.
I'm sure I was not the only person who recommended a cupola because it's a great idea. And the cupola that was built in Italy and delivered to the space station is absolutely the most popular spot on the International Space Station. Astronauts spend every opportunity looking out these big 30-centimeter windows to watch the Earth below.
In the race to the red planet, private companies are working to reduce the physical and psychological risks to humans by providing habitation modules for the next giant leap into deep space. As private and public organizations from all over the world forge forward on the road to the red planet, some space engineering companies are simply adapting tried and tested concepts. Here in Turin, Franco-Italian company Thales Alenia Space has already delivered 8 Cygnus pressurized logistics vehicles for use by NASA and is developing a human habitat for future deep space employment.
One of the key points will be to understand how to change the internal accommodation with respect to what was done for the module of the space station, and then to understand which could be the improvement in terms of structure, mass optimization.
Orion is a capsule and service module combination that NASA has contracted Lockheed Martin and Airbus Defence and Space to make. It is a spaceship designed to take humans safely into deep space for decades to come. The massive rocket that will blast Orion into space is called the Space Launch System, or SLS.
Deep space is a very different environment. The radiation is higher than in low Earth orbit, and we can't use GPS in deep space because we're too high, so we need a different way to navigate. Our communication systems need to be more powerful to get back to Earth. And because the crew will be 3 or 4 days away from being back safely on their surface, the Orion spacecraft has a number of safety features built in, backups to the backups to make sure that whatever situation the crew gets in, they can get safely home.
The Orion spacecraft is composed of several different modules. At the bottom, the adapter, then the service module which provides propulsion, power, gases and liquids, and finally the crew capsule that includes heat shield, thermal protection systems, computers and life support systems to keep the crew alive during the various phases of launch, flight and re-entry. Above the crew capsule in the forward bay are the parachutes, with the launch support system at the very top, which is capable of separating the crew capsule in case of emergency. Orion is designed to minimize the risk of human error while still providing maximum autonomy to the pilot.
With the miniaturization of avionics, the vehicle systems on Orion can be smaller and lighter and do more functions than before. But also in the deep space environment and the radiation that's there, as well as the rigors of launch and landing, Orion's computers are specially built for that purpose and tend to be bigger. Orion is designed to be either flown manually by the crew, flown manually by the ground, or be completely autonomous, or a mixture of any three. And this capability is really necessary as we go into longer and longer voyages into deep space.
While the crew capsule is under construction by Lockheed Martin near Denver, Colorado, the service module is being built by the European Space Agency at the Airbus Defence and Space site in Bremen, Germany. Matthias Gronowski is the chief engineer of the service module construction program.
In Germany we have a very large group of industry and also scientists. They would like to do really experiments on board a station, jointly together with a crew on board. So I guess it's more coming from that perspective that here we have quite significant heritage. The International Space Station a huge worldwide project running with JAXA, with the European Space Agency, with the Russians and NASA. And now we continue. We go the next giant step in direction of Moon Mars. And that's what we do again jointly. And only in this, let's say, joint team effort, we can be successful.
The first test mission to send humans out into deep space will involve spending 3 weeks in a cramped capsule, just a fraction of the 9 months estimated for going all the way to Mars. Surviving these conditions will take a very special astronaut.
The social skills that we identified from the analog research are teamwork, patience, emotional control, tolerance, affability, and confidence. And confidence is not really a skill, but it's a personality trait derived from experience.
Teams will be selected in and out completely based on their ability to function. And some of the psychological things they're going to start doing is isolation tests. Because once you go in, and I always think about this, I think it's no different than scientific teams that have to live in bases on Antarctica or in submarines. You know, you're in an enclosed small space. And we all know, you know, when you're in an enclosed small space with other humans, psychologically, that can be trying if some humans don't have the capacity to communicate or have conflict resolution abilities. And that's going to be very interesting.
Astronauts will require specific professional skills to function as individuals in a team, and those skills have been identified in Jack Stuster's research.
The pilot needs reaction time, spatial orientation, rate control and control precision, all these kinds of tasks, all these skills that are needed by pilots to land aircraft safely. The others, the leader, the biologist, geologist, mechanic and electrician, IT specialist, all rated inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, problem sensitivity, information ordering, and all these problem-solving abilities as the highest in their fields.
Conditions during a flight lasting many months will be a challenge. Instead of showering, astronauts will use wet wipes. Freeze-dried and canned food is all there will be to eat. 3 hours of exercise is required every day to maintain muscle mass in the zero-gravity environment. There will be constant noise on the flight, and each astronaut will have less than 20 square meters of living space. The danger and discomfort, however, does not seem to deter Sue Ann Pien from her dream of deep space flight. She even jokes about being the first to ever take a selfie on Mars.
If you think about a citizen of the planet, you know, if you get off planet, your perspective starts to change. And you start to see that we're actually one globe, and we need to learn to work together in a unified way. And it doesn't matter where you're from, if you're Chinese, American, Italian, Russian. At the end of the day, how we interact with one another, when you change the perspective, it shows that we're one.
There are certain lessons for getting along in space, such as think about what you're going to say or do before you say or do it. This is especially important when you might be reacting to something, when an astronaut might be reacting to something, an issue, knowing that trivial issues are exaggerated. Put your stuff away. Don't leave things around. Don't leave your laptop open on the workstation. Don't put away the materials that you used for a previous task. Most important is try not to be annoying in any way.
Actually getting to Mars is fraught not only with threats to the human body and mind, but also with engineering difficulties that will have a bearing on the survival of the elite team that is eventually sent. However, the spectacular launch of Falcon Heavy showed that some of that technology is already available. The young entrepreneur Elon Musk is a visionary who has made big promises.
A few years ago, we didn't have a rocket that's capable of doing what SpaceX is now able to do in terms of bringing massive cargo and eventually people. You know, Elon Musk wants to bring 1 million people on Mars and create a Martian city at one point, and he's not joking around, and he's advancing at a really quick pace. So, you know, the things that we got to do right now, we have to be able to work in teams, I think. I think it's not anymore about a competitiveness of who's going to be the first. It's going to be, well, here's what we can create. We can give you the first teams that are trained, you know, over 10 years of humans that can absolutely live and survive on Mars.
If a crew does land and finds that previous robotic missions have created a shelter, what will life be like for the small group?
In terms of getting people to live on the red planet, there's still a long ways to go. So what we're looking at right now, I know Mars One actually contracted with Paragon to create the first life support system, as well as a Martian suit that could withstand the radiation and the different temperature variations and fluctuations and atmospheric changes that needs to happen once people are there. That being said, technology is moving at a rapid pace.
Selecting a crew for the first few expeditions to Mars, human expeditions to Mars, is going to be very difficult. We will identify their occupational specialties. We'll identify the abilities and social abilities, skills needed. But when it comes time to actually selecting the crew, all of that will probably get put aside, and it will be the Russians get to select, the Americans get to select, the Europeans get to select, the Japanese will probably get to select, and who knows if maybe the Chinese will be involved by that time. And so it will really probably boil down to training.
Assuming that the technical problems of getting to Mars are solved in the next 2 decades, and our knowledge of Mars improves enough to be able to plan a manned mission in detail, someone will soon be setting foot on the red planet. Surviving on Mars will be the biggest challenge facing the first humans to land there. While space capsules and habitats will have been tried and tested before they leave, the Mars soil, known on Earth as regolith, and the atmosphere are both toxic to humans.
Obviously, there's issues with not having enough oxygen on the surface. You'd be supplying your own. The radiation environment is really harsh. So if we do send future humans to Mars, we'd probably be looking at habitats that would be underground or built into a hillside so that you're partially protected from that cosmic radiation. Having any of the necessary resources. There are some places on Mars that might have some water, as subsurface ice, but right now those aren't places on Mars that we can easily land a spacecraft.
The biggest risk is from charged particles, solar events, because there is no protection of the crew in transit for the 6 months going to Mars or the 6 months coming back, or when they're on the surface of Mars. That's why the habitat that will be built, that will be positioned in advance of the crew, must be covered with something. A meter of Martian regolith would help, but something has to be done to shield the humans on the surface of Mars from radiation.
Once I enter my 40s, the risks on my body in terms of radiation lower significantly. So to me, I'm like, it's going to be all right,
Lockheed Martin is planning to create an orbiting base camp, avoiding the need for humans to actually live on Mars.
Mars Base Camp is Lockheed Martin's vision for sending crew to Mars within about a decade. It's a system that includes habitat elements, propulsion elements, large solar arrays, laboratories. The Mars Base Camp Lander and Ascent Vehicle is a key piece of technology to enable us getting to the surface of Mars in later missions. And in having it being able to be reusable and using aerodynamics to slow down and supersonic retro propulsion, that allows us to visit multiple places on the surface of Mars and bring scientists, astronauts to those locations to explore the surface of Mars.
Wherever these astronauts actually live, they will be confined for months on end, even years, in a tiny and dangerous space. In most hypothetical scenarios, Mars astronauts land on the planet to find habitation modules already deployed. They will have to work hard, however, to turn this barren land into anything hospitable. The presence of water will be essential for success. The rovers roaming the surface of the red planet today are providing new clues about the geology and topography of Mars and the water present on it, which scientists hope might one day be able to be utilized to farm and support human life.
We can't all of a sudden get a well and look into a lovely pool of water that's gushed up from beneath the surface. So you would have to contain it in an atmosphere contained within a device, a structure that would enable the temperatures to be increased and the pressures to be increased so that it could be retained as liquid water.
Once the astronauts are on Mars, and the next opportunity to launch back into space and return to Earth arises, they will have had to synthesize fuel for their launch vehicle to return home. Probably the biggest single advantage derived from travel to Mars is the advancement of related technology on Earth. The billions spent so far on Mars research could help solve problems on Earth with its dwindling resources and ominous climate change. The field of medicine is a promising area for space spin-off research that could have a positive impact on our daily lives. Here at the University of Nice, Yassine Ben Youssef is the CEO of the French startup Space Medex. He is testing new systems for rehabilitating stroke victims. The technology is based on a weightlessness simulator built by Mars Planet in Italy.
This is our laboratory in partnership with the LAMES at the University of Nice. The microgravity was put here to make some trial and to evaluate the work pattern in hypergravity. So how it works, you can go inside, attach that piece of metal with the harness and this circle for safety, and you go on the platform, the treadmill, and the form of the treadmill allow you to walk and to stay at your place. And with cameras and some sensors, you can use virtual reality and stay at the same place walking in a virtual environment like in the Mars habitat on the moon.
The system is tested here with a sports medicine lecturer. She is able now to walk in a simulated weightless environment.
On the screen you can see like marker, so we put some marker on the subject to specific point, like this on the foot. And after that, with all the camera around the system, we can capture the coordinate of each marker. And when we're moving, we can see the people moving. And after that, we can measure all the joint angle, like the knee, the foot, and the hip. And the objective of the project is to compare walking on treadmill and walking on the multigravity to see if the kinematics, so the joint angle, is similar. And finally, we can put them on rehabilitation program to see if we can, like using the hypogravity to get normal walking pattern.
When we go into space, we take upon ourselves all of the conditions that occur in the aging process to humans on the surface of Earth. We have loss of bone mineral. we increase the amount of fluid in the body. We get that in old age. But in addition, we change the red cell blood count as well, which makes us less resilient against disease and against infection. All the organs lift. Our spine stretches 1 or 2 or 3 centimeters. We change the way in which our brains actually process information because it begins to impress upon the cranial cavity.
Finding solutions to the typical side effects that come from prolonged periods in space, such as the weakening of bones, could have enormous socio-economic advantages on Earth, where the aging population suffers from bone density loss and osteoporosis.
The great advantage of humans in space is that they are making a unique contribution to the database and the support for the care of the elderly on Earth. This is a great big unsaid truth about space medicine. And there are universities around the world working with what is considered to be the biggest collection of human physiological data on the surface of the Earth, that held by NASA and the US Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine.
We've pretty much solved muscle atrophy by vigorous exercise. They're working on bone demineralization, and they're working on pharmaceutical type mitigations. And when that is solved, which it must be solved before we can go to send humans to Mars, it will change everything on Earth. Imagine not having to worry about a broken hip as you grow old. That will be probably the biggest spin-off of NASA technology. The cost to society each year for broken hips in North America is $45 billion. That's more than twice NASA's annual budget.
Xuan Pian is fully aware of the risks to her body, but she is not deterred. She sings and dances her way across the Earth's stage. On Mars, she'll be lucky to survive.
You have to make sure that you're in a certain level of health. You know, we watched Scott Kelly go around the globe, and when he came back, there was definitely issues about his eyesight. And, you know, I think there's a lot we don't know yet about how space can affect us. We're pushing the levels of human adaptability, right? And we were talking about phenotypes and, you know, how human phenotypes can change based on the environment. Now, if you think about a human that eventually goes to Mars, where the gravity is a third less, you're going to look at humans that are going to be taller and skinnier eventually, and we're going to adapt in very different ways.
The dreamers may hope that one day humankind will set foot on Mars, but the sheer distances and the real threats to the bodies and minds of humans undertaking that voyage seem nearly insurmountable. But are there more urgent uses for the monster rockets being built to fly into deep space?
There are these other destinations, the asteroids, that really we should be looking into. You're probably aware that every month a new asteroid is discovered that passes between the orbit of the Moon and Earth. We need to learn more about asteroids and their composition in order to develop means for defending Earth from something that is really a serious risk. I've said, you know, Mars attracts our attention, but the asteroids demand it.
The race to the red planet will certainly lead to exciting extraterrestrial discoveries, but will also vastly expand what we know about our own planet and our own biology.
You can explore challenges to current knowledge, and you can push on the frontiers of human understanding and roll back the mists of ignorance and uncertainty and discover new things. That is implicit within the human condition. It is why we want to explore.
Humanity is exploring the universe faster and further than ever before. But is it safe? Can people survive on Mars? The rovers and orbiters we send for reconnaissance can tell us a lot about the Red Planet. But only landing humans there will reveal the deadly risks that lie ahead.